All right, let's talk rankings updates. As always, you could find our rankings up on the website, cbssports.com/fantasy/baseball/rankings. You could also find them on the CBS Fantasy app. And let's start with the risers. Chris, go over to you. Who are some of the biggest risers in your rankings this week?
All right. I have moved Evan Herrera up quite a bit. I have moved Josh Naylor, Luis Garcia from the Nationals, not the one from the Padres or the Astros. Justin Turner, we have not talked, but Justin Turner's been very good.
Yep.
And it's one of those ones where he just ends up buried in the rankings at the start of the season because it's like, nobody wants Justin Turner. And then the season starts and he invariably hits really well. And it's like, oh, yeah, Justin Turner. Andy Pajas, Max Scherzer with his looming return. I moved him ahead of like Kodai Senga and other guys who are well behind him. Sonny Gray has looked really awesome so far. Had to move Mason Miller up. He is the most electrifying man in sports entertainment right now, so had to move him up.
Do you smell what Mason Miller is cooking?
He's just so much fun.
Yeah, and for those wondering, why don't you have Mason Miller ranked as a reliever? It's the same thing we spoke about earlier with Garrett Crochet. He needs to make 10 appearances on the season to have relief pitcher eligibility on CBS. I think he's made 8 so far, so he has to make 2 more appearances, and then we will obviously rank him as a reliever on the site. Scott, I know you had a big rankings update, and there's an article on the site to accompany that. Who were some of the names that moved up for you?
Well, I went ahead and moved Ellie De La Cruz past Rafael Devers in Roto Leagues, still behind Austin Riley for me. His numbers through this point of the season look remarkably similar to his numbers through a similar point after his call-up last year, and we all know how that turned out. So, maintaining a healthy skepticism, but at the same time, crazy high upside there. Josh Naylor is probably the one I want to focus on most because I am sold on him being a total stud, I think. And it was a long and winding path to get there, filled with injuries and platoon situations and whatever else. But now he's combining the contact skills of a Stephen Kwan with like legitimate middle of the order power. And his numbers have been good against lefties for a couple years now. So he's all the way up to 7th for me. Josh Naylor is at first base. Actually, I'm sorry. I should say he's up to 6 now because I just had to move Cody Bellinger down with his injury. So he's up to 6 now, and that is the highest ranked first baseman beyond what I think is an impenetrable top 5 of what's that top 5? Matt Olson, Freddie Freeman, Bryce Harper, Pete Alonso, and Vladimir Guerrero. The next first baseman for me now is Josh Naylor. How do you like that? Good for him. I moved Paul Goldschmidt down, not just behind Josh Naylor, but also behind Christian Walker and Spencer Steer, one of my preseason bust picks there. And it's not looking good so far. Again, too early to completely tank Paul Goldschmidt, but I have a lot of faith in Walker and Steer. And so I think I'm happy to say they deserve to be ahead of him now. Others that I've moved up include Jordan Westberg. He now is in my top 10 at second base. So
Scott, you're a liar. You're a liar.
We just got to a point where like I ran out of players. I ran out of second basemen to rank ahead of him because, of course, Zach Geloff has had his issues and Luis Ariz and Nolan Gorman. They've had their struggles. And it's just like, would I really take any of those guys over Jordan Westberg? No. So Jordan Westberg now top 10 rest of season. Didn't take me long to get there. Also moved up his teammate Cedric Mullins, who's showing that power speed potential again. Starling Marte, could say the same for him. In my pitcher rankings, you say Kikuchi, Ranger Suarez, and Nestor Cortez have moved up for obvious reasons. They've been pitching well. And I guess I should specify that I moved them ahead of some upside types who I'm now not as hopeful of them meeting their upside. Guys like Kyle Harrison and Carlos Rodon. I'd take more boring quote unquote types like Kikuchi, Suarez, and Cortez over them. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I did a lot of the same things. I got Josh Naylor up to 7th in my first base rankings, and I think Cedric Mullins moved inside my top 30 outfielders, Starling Marte inside the top 40. Well deserved. Lots of those similar starting pitchers. I think Kikuchi is like top 45 or top 50. So definitely on board with a lot of those rankings risers. I did want to mention, made some kind of big moves up at the top with Ellie and Gunnar Henderson. I know you mentioned you moved Ellie up, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Gunnar Henderson is just off to a tremendous start as well.
Mm-hmm.
3 for 3 with a sock in the shoe here on Wednesday. His 8th homer, his 5th steal, 20 runs, 20 RBI. He's batting over 300, an OPS over 1,000. And it's a really small sample size. One of my concerns with Gunnar has been struggles against lefties. So far this season, he's batting .324 with 2 homers and an OPS over 1,000 against left-handed pitching. So I moved both Ellie and Gunnar inside of my top 3 at third base. They are ahead of Austin Riley. They are ahead of Rafael Devers, and I think they're both top 6 at shortstop. So I think it's pretty drastic whenever players move up that high in the rankings. So I thought it was worth mentioning. I'm in. I'm just pretty much sold here on Gunnar and Ellie De La Cruz. Let's slide over to the fallers here. Chris, anyone you'd like to point out?
I moved Rafael Devers down, not just with Ellie De La Cruz jumping ahead of him, but I moved him down below Gunnar Henderson. I still keep the overall rankings for the trade value, so he's around 30th now for me. So that's about a round drop from where he was. And it's just all these injuries. I'm just a little worried about what it's going to mean for him coming back. The fact that he hasn't been able to get through them is concerning. I moved Spencer Torkelson down. I moved Nolan Jones and Jazz Chisholm down at outfield. Jazz just looks really bad right now. Still can't hit lefties. Not sure he's ever going to be able to. And Carlos Rodon, who we've talked a lot about. I was shocked to see that the Fangraphs Stuff Plus metric has his fastball as a top 10 fastball in baseball and his sliders like top 20, because I think those pitches have not been very good. And maybe it's just a command thing. Maybe he's just leaving them in the zone a bit too much and they can play up. But I've been very unimpressed by what we've seen from Carlos Rodon. I think he's one of the more obvious sell high candidates right now. And I have moved him down at starting pitcher to definitely outside the top 43 at starting pitcher for me.
Oh, I got him 68.
Oh, wow. You really hate Carlos Rodon.
Yeah, I really do. Yeah.
I just buried him too. I mean,
I thought I hated Carlos Rodon.
You don't hate him enough.
I moved him down to 58. So not as low.
Oh, wow. I love Carlos Rodon.
It wasn't really.
This is like last week when I said I didn't know we were allowed to move Jared Jones that high. You didn't know we were allowed to move Carlos Rodon that low.
I guess not.
Yeah.
For me, it was just moving so many pitchers ahead of Rodon. He just kept dropping down. It was just guys that have looked so good so far. Kikuchi, Ranger Suarez, Tanner Howe, Cutter Crawford, just a lot of these names. The more you move ahead of Rodon, he just kept slipping down for me. So
I said last time I'd be willing to drop Carlos Rodon for pretty much anybody who's interesting out there, and so I made sure my rankings reflected that.